So, Amy, what are we talking about today?
So today we're going to talk about something new. We're going to switch gears and talk about saving for college, which is another big expense item that people think about pretty regularly. And specifically, we're going to talk about one of the tools designed to help with saving for college, and that's the 529. So the 529 is basically like a 401k for education. So 401ks are for saving for retirement, and 529s are for saving for college.
Welcome to Operation Retirement Readiness, where Amy and Mike, two certified financial planners, talk about how military members can prepare for transition and how veterans can prepare for ultimate retirement. This podcast represents the views of the hosts and any guest. It is for informational purposes only and should not be considered tax, financial, or legal advice. All information is regarded to be from reliable sources. The hosts are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast. This podcast is not intended to replace professional advice.
In my experience over the years working with people, they either have super strong feelings about these accounts or they don't pay any attention to them. What about you, Mike? What's been your experience with 529s?
Yeah, there's definitely concerns, I guess, that some people have with 529s because again, it's pseudo locked into education, and so people are like, well, how do I know when my child is 1 or 2 when I should be starting this account that they're even going to go to college? And so that's a big thing that people deal with. And I think people get overly concerned with that. I mean, it's not like you can't get the money out. Yes, you're going to pay taxes on it. And yes, you may pay a penalty if you don't use it for education. But it's not as drastic and they can be very useful. So that's what I find that folks are concerned about with 529s.
Yeah, same. They also sometimes feel like they don't perform very well. I'm not sure why that is, but I have heard that, or they just don't understand the rules. They don't want to deal with it. Um, and the reality is, depending on the situation, specifically your situation, they can actually be pretty flexible, and a very valuable savings option, depending, like I said, depending on your situation. But before we jump too far into the details, Mike, can you just hit some highlights of the 529s for those who maybe never heard of them or have ignored them over the years?
Definitely. Like you said, 529 accounts are somewhat similar to a 401k. Allows you to contribute money after tax dollars into that account that'll grow tax free. And as long as that money is later used for education, qualifying educational expenses, which we'll talk about, you can use that money, all the earnings that it's had without paying taxes. So there's really two main types. One is the prepaid college tuition. So basically, with that, you're buying credits today at whatever prices are, typically for a specific school. And then, when your child is 18, they graduate and they're ready to go, you've amassed, 2.5 years worth of college, and that's already paid for. Those are kind of less popular, mainly because it is typically by the school or by some group of schools. And so parents are like, I don't know if my kid's really gonna, stay in state. And with military folks, you're moving around all the time. That's really hard to say that yes, they're gonna go back to Texas or Florida or Washington State and make that decision when they're 3 or 4 and you're starting to accumulate. Second one is very similar to the 401k. It's an investment account where you're just contributing to. You can pick the investments you want that invested in, and then that just grows over time. And then when they're ready, you're just paying for school at whatever the current rates are, really for whatever school they want to go to. So those are really the two accounts or two types of accounts for 529s. that people use. But the investment account is definitely the much more popular option today.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, the prepaid plans might be really great for those people who, your kid's going to stay in state or that they're going to go to some specific school for some reason. Maybe everybody in your family goes to, this particular university. But one, military folks move around a lot, and two, kids have a way of doing exactly what their parents don't want them to do. Um, so, so they're not very popular. But the flip side of for the investment plan version, you are taking on some market risk. Most people do choose to accept that market risk over a long time horizon. So if you're starting to save for college when, maybe even before your children are born, but if you're starting, 10, 15 years, maybe even 18 years before they head off to school, you can, people are willing to accept that market risk. Either way, a lot of the details around the accounts on how they work are pretty similar. For example, the types of expenses that are considered qualified expenses are the same for both. Mike, do you want to walk us through what qualified education expenses for use of 529 money are?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll hit on one thing before we jump to that. The one thing that people may say, oh, they don't perform very well, is a lot of times you get into kind of an age-based, similar to a retirement plan, where you're picking the year you're gonna, retire. With these accounts, a lot of times you're picking the year the kid's going to graduate high school, and so as you get closer, the funds automatically take on less risk, because the last thing you want to have happen is, you saved $80,000 for college and you're a year out and the stock market, craters and goes down 25%. Now you got $60,000. So they manage that and they put you on a glide slope to, mainly having cash as you close in on high school graduation. So yeah, at that point you're not generating a lot of returns. So folks say, oh, they don't return very well, but that's really by design and not a bug, as they say. So, but yeah, as far as qualified expenses, of course, tuition, room and board, even books and supplies can be used out of 529. Computers, if you need to pay for the internet, all of those type of things, any kind of software, specialty things needed for the college classes, as long as they're kind of required for the course, they can be added. And then a new thing that you can use 529s for is K through 12 tuition if kids are going to a private school. So that's a limit of up to $10,000 per year per beneficiary. So it's capped, but again, if you are going to send your kid to private school and you know that even before they're born, it can make sense to start investing early, or maybe grandparents have done that, and that can be a good way to also use a 529.
Yeah. Yeah. And, one note, these expenses, these qualified expenses, I just like to footnote, highlight, underline that this list is specific to 529 qualified expenses. So there's different qualified expenses for different things. So if your family is eligible for education tax credits, those expenses are a little bit different. So it's important to make sure that you're thinking about qualified expenses for 529 plans, because there are different lists. And then, another qualified expense that is also new is that you can use up to $10,000 to pay off school loans. That is a lifetime cap. So whereas the K through 12 tuition, $10,000, that's per year per beneficiary. The $10,000 school loan is a lifetime cap per beneficiary. So, somebody finishes school, you think there's money left, but, you didn't have quite enough in quite enough ways to use 529 money, or you continued to save, or another child didn't go to school. and somehow you have student loans, you can use up to $10,000 to pay for school loans. And then the very newest way, in fact, just the beginning of this year is the first time you could do it, is the ability to transfer up to $35,000 from a 529 to a Roth IRA. It's a lifetime limit per beneficiary, and there's a ton of rules around when and how this can be done. But with proper planning, this new rule could make a huge difference in retirement planning for your children, whether you're doing it deliberately or just because you have leftover money. I mean, just imagine the power of $35,000 compounding at 5, 6, 7, 8% per year for 40 or 50 years. I mean, depending on actual returns, Mike, we're talking about anywhere from, a few $100,000 to over $1 million, just because you could roll 35,000 from a 529 to a Roth IRA.
Yeah, it's really powerful. Like you said, brand new. So make sure you're checking all the rules, talking to your tax preparer if you're thinking about doing this, and or financial planner on how you go about doing this. But it is nice that they finally came up with that. Some of the other rules around it, the account, meaning the 529 account, has to be open for at least 15 years. And the money that you're taking out has had to have been in for at least 5. So it's not something that, if you haven't started the 529 yet, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. But again, you're going to have tax-free growth in there. So if you do have money left over, even if you don't meet that timeline and, don't need it for your own retirement, or really want to help out your kids, typically who are the beneficiary of the 529, you can look into this, and maybe you got to hold it a few more years, but then you'll be able to do that. One other thing, it is subject to whatever the maximum or Roth IRA or IRA limits are at that time. And the other piece is the beneficiary also has to have enough earned income. So if they've only got $5,000 of earned income, that's the limit for that year that you'll be able to transfer. So again, lots of rules that you need to be aware of, but something that will hopefully, make people go, well, I do have an out that I'm not going to pay a penalty and taxes on if I end up not, or if my child ends up not going to college, or they get a lot of scholarships or go to a military academy, that I can now still use that money without issue. So
yeah, I mean, it was a great ad. Lots of complexity there, making sure that you do it the right way for the right reasons, but it's a great option. Another way that you can get money out of the 529. So a lot of times I'll hear people say, I don't want to use a 529. My kid's smart. They're going to get scholarships. Or for military families, I want my kid to go to one of the academies. You can actually take money out of a 529 penalty free if your child receives a scholarship. So if your child receives an ROTC scholarship that's, worth, say, $40,000, whatever it's worth, you can take that amount out of the 529 without paying the 10% penalty. Now, you will pay tax on the capital gains. So there's an amount of that 40,000 that's coming out that you personally put in, but then there's some portion that's gain. You'll pay tax on the gain part at capital gains rates. And this is essentially what would happen if you had invested in a brokerage account anyway. So it's just about the same. The only difference is you haven't had to pay tax on the dividends and the growth or any, sales that you may have made over the years in the brokerage account. You don't have to do that in the 529. So no penalty. It grows tax-free. You will need to pay capital gains on the gain portion that you take out. But it's another way to get money back out of a 529 without the penalty. And it's almost like you had it in a brokerage account except for you didn't have to worry about the tax piece of things over the years. There's some other things that like tax advantages to these accounts, particularly around state tax advantages. Mike, what do you want to tell us about state taxes?
Yeah, well, we said, the money goes in after tax dollars. That's at the federal level. At the state level, some states do offer tax breaks, credits for funding 529s, and so that can be a good option if your state allows that you can save more on your state taxes even by funding your five.
Yeah, and that you make the great point. The 529s are usually sponsored by a state. Not all states offer 529. If a state offers a 529, some of them only offer them through a financial advisor, meaning you have to work with somebody in order to open it. An individual can't open it. Some states only offer one that can only be offered by or opened by individuals. And then some states offer both versions. Every plan's a little bit different. They have different fees. They have different investment options. They have different contribution limits and rules. But a great resource for comparing these 529s, you can go to savingforcollege.com, which does a good job breaking down the basics of each state plan, even kind of let you know whether or not that particular state offers any sort of tax break, whether it's specific to the state plan or if it's any plan. And then in terms of performance, Morningstar actually publishes annual rankings for 529 plans in terms of investment performance and quality of the investment management team. So those are two great resources to help you select a plan that makes sense for your overall situation while making sure that you understand what the costs are and what investment options you might have access to.
Yeah, that's all great points. If you don't get a tax break, definitely shop around, look at the Morningstar rankings, because again, some of the fees and things like that are better with certain 529 plans than others. So that's definitely important. So let's talk a little bit about who can actually open a 529 plan. And really, it's any adult. You can start it. You don't have to have kids to do it. I mean, you can open it for yourself if you want to, if you're planning to go back to grad school at some point, or maybe you're getting your degree later in life. You can fund a 529, and you would be the owner. You would be the one contributing the money. You would, quote, own the account. And then the second piece is then you would have a beneficiary, and that's who that money is going to go to when they have a need for college costs.
Yeah, and one thing to point out is that, and you alluded to it, is anyone can use a 529 plan of any age, which is a little bit different than the older Coverdell education savings accounts. I still see those from time to time. The Coverdell accounts have an age limit of age 30. So that's something to keep in mind if you have one of those old education savings accounts, is just making sure that you know that those funds have to be used by the beneficiary by age 30. Beneficiaries can be changed for a 529. Again, it can be anybody of any age in terms of, relative. But Mike, why don't you tell us more about like changing beneficiaries and who can be a beneficiary and all that kind of stuff?
Basically, the beneficiary, needs to be a first cousin or closer. So if you're the owner, your spouse, your parents, aunt and uncle, brother, sister, your kids, of course, and any of your kids' descendants, or the spouse of any of your kids' descendants. So kind of that line can be beneficiaries from within your own. And the account owner is the one who gets to direct the funds. So if you've got it identified, you've 3 kids and you've got 3 accounts, if child number 1 doesn't want to go to school, you can redirect that to child number 2 and child number 3, and there's no issue there. So sometimes people don't like the accounts. They say, it's too rigid. You want to talk a little more on that, Amy?
Yeah. I mean, I hear that. That's the number one thing I hear about why people don't have but just in the last few minutes, what we've talked about is the flexibility to change beneficiaries. So if your children decide not to go to school, but your spouse wants to go back to school, you can change the beneficiary. If you would like to help family members out and your children aren't going to use the 529 and you have a mind to help your family members, you can change the beneficiary. If you want to go back to school, you can change the beneficiary. In terms of funding qualified expenses, it isn't just college expenses at this point. We talked about the $10,000 lifetime limit for paying down school loans. Again, for any beneficiary that Mike just reviewed. So if you have a mind to help family members out, that might be a way that you can help family members out. And also the K through 12 expenses. So military families move around a lot, sometimes landing in areas where they don't love the schools, so they might choose to put their kids in private school. So those K through 12, $10,000 per year beneficiary, that's more flexibility. The ability to withdraw funds if the child receives a scholarship without having to pay the penalty is more flexibility. And there's no age limitation, which means that you can keep these accounts around for a while, which, we're not going to get into this, but I'll let Mike talk about the concept of how important the no age limitation flexibility factor is.
A lot of folks on the, more ultra wealthy side see this as a great way to just provide dynastic generational wealth. As we talked about, you can give it to a lot of family members down the line. And so saving in this vehicle, growing it significantly over time, just can fund, again, multi-generational education courses for kids, grandkids, great-grandkids. So if you have the money, and Amy, I think the one thing we didn't hit is, how much can you contribute to these accounts? And so it's typically tied to the maximum gift exclusion per year, which I believe for 2024 is 17,000, or at least in that ballpark. Make sure you check. That says of 2024, but so that's a lot of money that you can contribute each and every year. And if you have that and have a generational, way to pass education on to kids, grandkids, and even further down, and have that money, it could be a great way to save tax-free, and just fund that for all your descendants. So it's a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you were going to start to talk about too, how do you balance funding education and funding retirement? So what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, if you're not somebody who is maxing out their 401k and their IRAs and that's not your problem, this is definitely something to think about. Is which do you fund? Do you fund the kids' education, or do you fund your retirement? And one of the sayings is you can't take loans for retirement. I kind of like to think of it, the Roth IRA is really powerful if you qualify for that. And if that's something you don't have enough to do both a Roth IRA, I kind of lean toward going toward the Roth IRA. It's also relatively flexible. One of the very nice things is you can pull out any contributions that you've made to a Roth IRA at any time for any reason. And there's no penalty, no tax, anything like that. So right now, the annual limit is about $7,000. So if you and your spouse are able to contribute and fully fund your IRAs starting when your kid is very young, that's $14,000 a year. We'll round up, say 20 years. You'll have $280,000 of contributions that, again, if you don't have the ability to do both, takes away the issues of what if they don't go to school? What if they get scholarships? And some of the objections. That's kind of my thought, is fund that first. It gives you options, and maybe early you're doing the IRA, and then as your income increases, you are able to start funding the 529 as they're closer to actually go into school and have a better idea of what they want to do. But in general, that's my preference. How about you, Amy?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great thought. And in general, I agree with you. Being able to, and that's actually one of the reasons that if the client is able to contribute to a Roth, meaning they're under the phase out limit for Roth IRA contributions and they have earned income for the year, I really want somebody to open a Roth IRA and put some money in it because, Mike's exactly right. You can withdraw your contributions without penalty. But the key to that is there's one caveat. The caveat is the account had to have been open for 5 years. A lot of the rules around the Roth IRA have the requirement that you have to have the account open for 5 years. So I agree that the Roth IRA can be, if you have to make a choice between the two, you can't do both, and you're able to contribute to a Roth IRA, then it's a great option. Just keeping in mind that you can't start the Roth IRA when your child's 15 years old, and think that you'll be able to just pull that money out without a penalty when they turn 18 years old and they start school.
Great point. Anything else we missed on the 529 side, Amy, that you think we need to hit?
I don't think so. I hope that, this podcast gives people an opportunity to sort of rethink maybe if they're in the camp of hating these accounts because they feel like they aren't flexible. I hope they'll give them a second look and just consider how or if it might fit into their overall education plan.
Yeah, I think it's great. Definitely another powerful tool in the toolkit that folks should consider if they either think or know they're going to have expenses for college or school now, even private school. A good way to do it. And also, a good option if you're a grandparent, good way to save for your, grandkids and help them out down the road. And, versus maybe buying them that next toy, put some money away, and they'll be happier not having to take out college loans, 15 years in the future. So definitely a powerful tool that people need to be aware of and fully consider when they're figuring out how to save for college.
Exactly. Well, Mike, this has been great. It's always good to talk with you, and I'm looking forward to our next podcast.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you. Thanks again, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
To get transcripts, show notes, or more information, go to operationretirementreadiness.com. Have a question or topic for the podcast? Send it to info@operationretirementreadiness.com. Find out more about Amy and Mike at their websites. Mike is the founder of Next Mission Financial Planning, LLC. He retired from the U.S. Air Force and has worked in the financial services sector since 2021. He is a certified financial planner, chartered financial consultant, and a certified college financial consultant. You can find out more about Mike at nextmissionfinancialplanning.com. Amy is the founder of Instar Financial Planning, LLC. She is retired from the U.S. Army and has worked in the financial services sector since 2019. She's a certified financial planner, a chartered federal employee benefits counselor, and a chartered retirement planning counselor. You can find out more about Amy at instarfp.com.